It was a chilly Tuesday morning, the kind where the air feels crisp and your breath turns into little clouds as you exhale. Ethan Carter woke up early, just like he always did these days. His alarm clock buzzed at 5:30 a.m. sharp, but he didn't need it. He'd been waking up before it even went off for months now. Ever since losing his job 6 months ago, every day felt like a battle to keep moving forward. Ethan lived in a small apartment that smelled faintly of old coffee and worn-out furniture. The walls were bare except for a few sticky notes reminding him of things he needed to do, like update resume or call landlord. It wasn't much, but it was home. And right now, all he could think about was his big chance today. A job interview at Innovatech Solutions, one of the biggest tech companies in the city. This wasn't just any interview. It was his ticket out of this rut. He got dressed in his only suit, the same navy blue one he'd worn to weddings, funerals, and every other important event in his life. The cuffs were slightly frayed, and the jacket had a tiny stain near the pocket from a spilled cup of tea last year, but Ethan made sure it looked as presentable as possible. After tying his shoelaces, he grabbed his bag, took a deep breath, and stepped outside. The streets were quiet, with only a few cars passing by and the occasional jogger running past him. Ethan walked briskly toward the subway station, rehearsing answers to potential questions in his head. "Tell us about yourself," he muttered under his breath. "I'm hardworking, reliable." He stopped mid-sentence when something caught his eye. A woman stood next to her car on the side of the road. Her hands were gripping her phone tightly, and she looked stressed. One of the tires was flat, and judging by the way she kicked the ground lightly, she clearly didn't know what to do. Ethan hesitated for a moment. He knew he couldn't afford to be late, not today, but something about the look on her face tugged at him. She seemed overwhelmed, maybe even scared. "Hey," Ethan called out as he approached her. "Need some help?" The woman turned around surprised. She looked like she was in her late 40s, dressed smartly in a blazer and trousers. Her hair was neatly tied back, and her expression softened when she saw Ethan standing there. "Oh, hi," she said, sounding both relieved and embarrassed. "Yeah, my tire's flat, and honestly, I have no idea how to fix it." Ethan nodded. "No worries, I can help." Without waiting for her response, he set his bag down and rolled up his sleeves. As he knelt beside the car inspecting the damaged tire, the woman introduced herself. "I'm Claire," she said simply, though she didn't offer anything else about herself. Ethan figured she must have been in a hurry too, given how impatiently she kept glancing at her watch. They worked together silently for a while, Ethan guiding her through the steps while she handed him tools. Occasionally, he cracked jokes to lighten the mood. "Flat tires are like bad days," he quipped. "Annoying, but they happen to everyone sooner or later." Claire chuckled softly, seeming to relax a bit. As they finished changing the tire, Ethan glanced at his own watch and felt his stomach drop. He'd missed the train, which meant he'd missed the interview. All those weeks of preparation, all the effort he'd put into getting here, it was slipping away because of a flat tire that wasn't even his. For a second, panic bubbled inside him. What was he supposed to do now? But then he looked over at Claire, who was smiling gratefully at him. "Thank you so much," she said sincerely. "You saved me today. I don't know what I would have done without your help." Ethan forced a smile, pushing aside his frustration. "Don't mention it," he replied. "Glad I could help." After bidding her goodbye, Ethan picked up his bag and started walking back toward the subway station. His mind raced with thoughts of missed opportunities and what-ifs. Still, despite everything, he couldn't bring himself to regret helping Claire. Deep down, he knew it was the right thing to do, even if it cost him dearly. It was a chilly Tuesday morning, the kind where the air feels crisp and your breath turns into little clouds as you exhale. Ethan Carter woke up early, just like he always did these days. His alarm clock buzzed at 5:30 a.m. sharp, but he didn't need it. He'd been waking up before it even went off for months now. Ever since losing his job 6 months ago, every day felt like a battle to keep moving forward. Ethan lived in a small apartment that smelled faintly of old coffee and worn-out furniture. The walls were bare, except for a few sticky notes reminding him of things he needed to do, like update resume or call landlord. It wasn't much, but it was home. And right now, all he could think about was his big chance today. A job interview at Innovatech Solutions, one of the biggest tech companies in the city. This wasn't just any interview, it was his ticket out of this rut. He got dressed in his only suit, the same navy blue one he'd worn to weddings, funerals, and every other important event in his life. The cuffs were slightly frayed, and the jacket had a tiny stain near the pocket from a spilled cup of tea last year. But Ethan made sure it looked as presentable as possible. After tying his shoelaces, he grabbed his bag, took a deep breath, and stepped outside. The streets were quiet, with only a few cars passing by and the occasional jogger running past him. Ethan walked briskly toward the subway station, rehearsing answers to potential questions in his head. "Tell us about yourself," he muttered under his breath. "I'm hard-working, reliable." He stopped mid-sentence when something caught his eye. A woman stood next to her car on the side of the road. Her hands were gripping her phone tightly, and she looked stressed. One of the tires was flat, and judging by the way she kicked the ground lightly, she clearly didn't know what to do. Ethan hesitated for a moment. He knew he couldn't afford to be late, not today, but something about the look on her face tugged at him. She seemed overwhelmed, maybe even scared. "Hey," Ethan called out as he approached her. "Need some help?" The woman turned around, surprised. She looked like she was in her late 40s, dressed smartly in a blazer and trousers. Her hair was neatly tied back, and her expression softened when she saw Ethan standing there. "Oh, hi," she said, sounding both relieved and embarrassed. "Yeah, my tire's flat, and honestly, I have no idea how to fix it." Ethan nodded. "No worries, I can help." Without waiting for her response, he set his bag down and rolled up his sleeves. As he knelt beside the car, inspecting the damaged tire, the woman introduced herself. "I'm Claire," she said simply, though she didn't offer anything else. About herself, Ethan figured she must have been in a hurry too, given how impatiently she kept glancing at her watch. They worked together silently for a while, Ethan guiding her through the steps while she handed him tools. Occasionally he cracked jokes to lighten the mood. "Flat tires are like bad days," he quipped. "Annoying, but they happen to everyone sooner or later." Claire chuckled softly, seeming to relax a bit. As they finished changing the tire, Ethan glanced at his own watch and felt his stomach drop. He'd missed the train, which meant he'd missed the interview. All those weeks of preparation, all the effort he'd put into getting here, it was slipping away because of a flat tire that wasn't even his. For a second, panic bubbled inside him. What was he supposed to do now? But then, he looked over at Claire, who was smiling gratefully at him. "Thank you so much," she said sincerely. "You saved me today. I don't know what I would have done without your help." Ethan forced a smile, pushing aside his frustration. "Don't mention it," he replied. "Glad I could help." After bidding her goodbye, Ethan picked up his bag and started walking back toward the subway station. His mind raced with thoughts of missed opportunities and what-ifs. Still, despite everything, he couldn't bring himself to regret helping Claire. Deep down, he knew it was the right thing to do, even if it cost him dearly. Ethan trudged back to his apartment, dragging his feet like he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. The morning had started with so much hope, and now it felt like everything had crumbled right in front of him. He slumped onto the couch, staring at the cracked screen of his phone as if it might magically deliver some good news. But all he saw were missed notifications, reminders about bills he couldn't pay, and job applications that hadn't gotten replies. He sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. "What a waste," he muttered to himself. Helping Claire had been the right thing to do, sure, but it didn't make the sting of missing the interview any less sharp. He replayed the moment in his head, the way she smiled when he finished fixing her tire, how grateful she seemed. It made him feel good for a second, but now reality was hitting hard. What difference did it really make? She'd probably forgotten about him already. Meanwhile, across town, Claire was sitting behind her massive desk in a corner office that overlooked the entire city. Her workspace was sleek and modern, with glass walls and shelves lined with awards and books. Outside, people buzzed around like ants, rushing from meeting to meeting. But inside, Claire sat quietly, lost in thought. Something about the young man who helped her earlier kept lingering in her mind. She remembered how calm and patient he'd been while changing her tire, explaining each step as though teaching her instead of just doing the work himself. Most people would have brushed her off or hurried through the task, especially if they were running late. But not him. There was something genuine about him, something rare these days. And then there was the fact that he didn't ask for anything. In return, not even his name before walking away. Curiosity got the better of her, and Claire opened her laptop. She typed in the name Ethan Carter, the same one he'd given her during their brief conversation. At first, she wasn't expecting much. Maybe he'd be another faceless stranger whose life wouldn't intersect with hers again. But what popped up on her screen stopped her cold. Ethan's resume appeared almost instantly. Turns out he was someone she should have met earlier, at the very interview he'd missed because he was helping her. As she scrolled through his qualifications, Claire couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. This guy wasn't just some random passerby. He was exactly the kind of person Innovatech Solutions needed. His background in software development, combined with his experience leading small teams, made him a perfect fit for the role they were trying to fill. Claire leaned back in her chair, letting the pieces fall into place. Here was someone who went out of his way to help a complete stranger without asking for anything in return. Someone who clearly valued kindness over convenience. In her line of work, where competition was fierce and egos often ran high, traits like empathy and integrity weren't always easy to find. But Ethan seemed to embody them naturally. The more she thought about it, the more convinced she became that this wasn't just coincidence. Life had a funny way of connecting dots in unexpected ways, and Claire had learned long ago to trust those moments. After all, she knew firsthand what it was like to struggle, to claw your way up from nothing. Back when she was starting out, nobody believed in her either. People told her she didn't belong in tech, that she wasn't cut out for leadership. But here she was now, running one of the most successful companies in the industry. Something inside her clicked. If anyone deserved a second chance, it was someone like Ethan. So she picked up her phone and dialed HR. "I need you to pull up Ethan Carter's file," she said firmly, "and clear my schedule tomorrow afternoon. I want to meet with him personally." The next day, Ethan was scrolling through yet another list of job postings when an email notification popped up on his screen. He clicked on it absent-mindedly, half expecting another rejection letter, but what he read instead made his heart skip a beat. "Dear Mr. Carter," the message began, "we regret to inform you that due to unforeseen circumstances, we were unable to conduct your scheduled interview yesterday. However, our CEO, Claire Bennett, has expressed interest in meeting with you directly to discuss potential opportunities within our organization. Please let us know a convenient time for you to visit our headquarters." Ethan blinked at the screen, reading the words over and over again. Was this real? Had the woman whose tire he fixed actually tracked him down? A mix of excitement and disbelief washed over him. Part of him wanted to pinch himself to make sure he wasn't dreaming. But deep down he knew this could be his shot, the break he'd been waiting for. Without wasting a second, Ethan replied to the email, confirming his availability for the following week. Then he sat back, staring at the ceiling, letting the news sink in. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to feel hopeful. Maybe things weren't as hopeless as they seemed. Maybe doing the right thing did pay off after all. As the days passed, Ethan prepared meticulously for the meeting. He updated his resume, practiced answering common interview questions, and even ironed his suit until it looked almost new. On the morning of the appointment, he woke up early, double-checked everything, and headed to Innovatech's headquarters with butterflies in his stomach. When he arrived, the building towered above him, its glass facade gleaming in the sunlight. Inside, the lobby was bustling with activity, employees chatting animatedly, visitors signing in at the front desk, and sleek elevators zipping up and down. Ethan felt a pang of intimidation, but reminded himself to stay calm. A receptionist greeted him warmly and escorted him to a private office on the top floor. As the door opened, Ethan froze. Sitting behind a polished mahogany desk was none other than Claire, the same woman he'd helped fix her flat tire just days ago. She stood up, smiling brightly, and extended her hand. "Ethan," she said warmly, "it's nice to see you again. I hope you don't mind me reaching out like this, but I wanted to thank you properly for what you did. You have no idea how much it meant to me." Ethan shook her hand, still stunned. I mean, it was nothing, really. Just glad I could help." Claire chuckled softly. "Nothing. Trust me, it was far from nothing. Let me explain why I asked you here today." And with that, she launched into a story that left Ethan speechless. A story about how his simple act of kindness had caught her attention, how his skills aligned perfectly with what the company needed, and how she believed in giving people chances to shine. By the end of their conversation, Ethan walked out of the office with more than just a handshake. He walked out with a job offer and a newfound belief that sometimes the smallest acts can lead to the biggest changes. Ethan's promotion to Vice President of Innovation didn't just change his career, it changed the way he saw himself. For years he'd struggled with self-doubt, wondering if he was good enough or smart enough to make it in a world that often felt stacked against him. But now, standing in his new corner office overlooking the city skyline, Ethan realized something important. Success wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up, working hard, and never giving up, even when things got tough as Vice President. Ethan had more responsibilities than ever before. He led brainstorming sessions, oversaw multiple teams, and represented Innovatech at industry events. At first, the pressure weighed heavily on him. Every decision felt monumental, every meeting like a test of his abilities. But over time, he found his rhythm. He learned to trust his instincts, lean on his team, and embrace challenges instead of fearing them. One of the biggest lessons Ethan carried with him came from Claire herself. She often reminded him that leadership wasn't about having all the answers. It was about empowering others to find solutions. "You're not here to do everything yourself," she'd say during their one-on-one meetings. "Your job is to create an environment where people feel valued and inspired to contribute." Taking those words to heart, Ethan made it a priority to connect with his team members. He held regular check-ins, asking how they were doing both personally and professionally. When someone faced a roadblock, he encouraged them to think creatively rather than offering quick fixes. And when someone achieved something big, whether landing a major client or solving a tricky technical issue, he made sure to celebrate their success publicly. But perhaps the most impactful thing Ethan did was lead by example. He never forgot what it felt like to be overlooked or underestimated, so he went out of his way to ensure no one on his team felt that way under his watch. If someone seemed hesitant to share their ideas in meetings, he'd call on them directly, saying things like, "I know you've got great insights, let's hear them." Or if someone stayed late to finish a project, he'd bring them coffee the next morning as a small gesture of appreciation. These little actions added up. Over time, Ethan noticed a shift in the team's dynamic. People started speaking up more, collaborating more freely, and taking ownership of their work. They weren't just employees anymore. They were partners in creating something meaningful. Watching this transformation unfold gave Ethan a deep sense of fulfillment. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was truly making an impact. Of course, not everything was smooth sailing. Even as Ethan rose through the ranks, he encountered moments of doubt and frustration. There were days when projects hit snags, deadlines loomed impossibly close, or disagreements flared among team members. During these times, Ethan leaned on the lessons he'd learned along the way. Stay calm, listen carefully, and focus on finding solutions rather than assigning blame. One particularly challenging project stands out in Ethan's memory. The team was tasked with developing a cutting-edge feature for Innovatech's flagship product, a tool designed to help businesses predict customer behavior using artificial intelligence. On paper, it sounded revolutionary. In practice, it turned out to be far more complicated than anyone anticipated. For weeks, the team worked tirelessly, only to hit dead ends and setbacks at every turn. Algorithms failed, Data sets were incomplete, and tensions ran high. Some team members began questioning whether the project was even feasible. Ethan could see the frustration building, and he knew he had to act fast before morale plummeted completely. Instead of pushing harder, Ethan decided to take a step back. He called everyone together for an off-site brainstorming session away from the office. No laptops, no phones, just pens, paper, and open minds. The goal was simple. Forget about the problems for a moment and focus on the bigger picture. Why? Were they building this tool? Who would benefit from it? What problem were they trying to solve? The change of pace worked wonders. Freed from the constraints of coding and debugging, the team began thinking outside the box. Ideas flowed freely, and soon they were sketching out entirely new approaches to the problem. By the end of the day, they'd come up with a fresh strategy that simplified the original concept while still delivering powerful results. When the revamped version launched months later, it exceeded everyone's expectations. Clients loved it, sales skyrocketed, and the media hailed it as a game-changer for the industry. For Ethan, the victory wasn't just about numbers or accolades. It was proof that perseverance and teamwork could overcome even the toughest obstacles. As the months rolled by, Ethan's reputation within Innovatech continued to grow. Colleagues admired his leadership style, which balanced authority with empathy. Upper management praised his ability to deliver results without sacrificing morale. And Claire? She couldn't have been prouder. "You've grown so much since we first met," she told him one evening after a company event. "Do you remember that day on the side of the road?" Ethan chuckled. "How could I forget? I thought my life was falling apart. And look at you now," Claire said with a smile. "You've built something incredible, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you." Her words stuck with Ethan long after their conversation ended. They reminded him of why he kept pushing forward, even when the odds seemed impossible. Success wasn't just about climbing the ladder, it was about lifting others up along the way. With this mindset, Ethan began looking for ways to give back beyond the walls of Innovatech. He started mentoring interns, sharing the lessons he'd learned throughout his journey. He volunteered at local schools, teaching kids basic coding skills and encouraging them to pursue careers in tech. And whenever he encountered someone struggling, whether it was a coworker facing burnout or a stranger needing directions, he took the time to help, knowing firsthand how much a single act of kindness could mean. By the end of his second year as vice president, Ethan had become more than just a leader. At Innovatech, he'd become a role model, a living testament to the power of resilience, gratitude, and compassion. And though he still had plenty of challenges ahead, he faced them with confidence, knowing he wasn't alone. He had a team behind him, a mentor, guiding him, and a belief in himself that no setback could shake. As he looked out over the city lights from his office window one evening, Ethan reflected on how far he'd come. From losing his job and feeling lost to rising to the top of one of the most competitive industries, his journey had been anything but easy. But it was precisely those struggles, the moments of uncertainty and sacrifice, that had shaped him into the person he was today. Ethan's journey had come full circle in ways he never expected. As he stood on stage at a charity gala hosted by Innovatech, surrounded by hundreds of guests dressed in suits and gowns, he felt a mix of emotions, pride, gratitude, and a deep sense of responsibility. The spotlight wasn't something he was used to, but tonight it felt right. Tonight, he wanted to share his story, not for himself, but for everyone who might need a reminder that kindness can change lives. The room buzzed with conversation as Claire introduced him to the audience. "Tonight we have someone very special joining me on stage," she said warmly. "His name is Ethan Carter, and his journey is proof that doing the right thing, even when it's hard, can lead to incredible outcomes." Applause filled the room as Ethan stepped forward, adjusting the microphone nervously. He took a moment to scan the faces in front of him, each one unique yet connected by their presence here tonight. Then with a deep breath he began to speak. "Let me start by saying this isn't just my story," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in his chest. It's a story about how small actions can ripple out in ways we can't predict, about how helping someone in need doesn't always pay off immediately, but sometimes it changes everything. He paused, letting the words sink in before continuing. A little over 2 years ago, I was standing on the side of the road, changing a flat tire for a stranger. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I was late for an important job interview, the kind of opportunity you dream about, and missing it felt like the end of the world. But looking back now, I realized that moment wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The audience leaned in, captivated not just by what he was saying, but by the sincerity in his tone. Ethan wasn't delivering a polished speech. He was sharing a piece of his soul. That stranger turned out to be Claire Bennett, the CEO of Innovatech Solutions. And because of that chance encounter, I got a second chance. A chance to prove myself, to grow, and to become part of something bigger than I ever imagined. But none of that would have happened if I hadn't stopped to help her that day. Ethan smiled faintly, remembering the frustration he'd felt at the time. I won't lie, it wasn't easy. There were days when I doubted myself, when people whispered behind my back, or when things seemed impossible. But through it all, I held onto one truth: doing the right thing matters. Even when it costs you, even when it feels inconvenient, it matters. His gaze shifted to Claire, who sat smiling proudly from her seat near the front. And I'm not just talking about stopping to fix a tire. I'm talking about every choice we make every single day. Do we take the time to listen? To lift others up? To show compassion when it's easier to look away? Those choices add up. They shape who we are, and they shape the world around us. By now, the room was silent except for the occasional sniffle from someone moved to tears. Ethan went on, his voice growing stronger with each word. When Claire gave me this opportunity, she didn't just change my life. She reminded me of the power of believing in people. So as I moved up in the company, I made it my mission to pay that forward. To create a workplace where everyone feels valued, where people know their contributions matter, no matter how big or small. He shared stories of moments that defined his leadership, like staying late to help a struggling intern debug a project, or organizing team-building activities to strengthen bonds within the group. Success isn't just about hitting targets or making profits, he said firmly. It's about creating opportunities for others to shine, because when we lift each other up, we all rise higher. As Ethan wrapped up his speech, he turned reflective. I'll admit, there are still days when I wonder if I'm good enough, if I'm living up to the expectations people have of me. But then I remember something Claire told me early on. True leaders aren't perfect, they're persistent. Persistence is what keeps me going, knowing that every effort counts, even if it doesn't seem like it at first. He looked out at the audience, his expression softening. So tonight I want to leave you with this. Don't underestimate the impact of your actions. Whether it's lending a hand to a stranger, supporting a colleague, or simply being kind to someone having a rough day, you never know whose life you might touch. You never know how far that ripple will go. The room erupted into applause, louder and more heartfelt than before. People stood cheering as Ethan stepped back and joined Claire on stage. She shook his hand warmly, her eyes shining with pride. Together, they raised a toast to the evening's theme, giving back. Afterward, guests approached Ethan one by one, eager to share their own stories of kindness and resilience. Some thanked him for inspiring them, others asked for advice on navigating tough times. Ethan listened intently to each person, offering encouragement and reminding them that they too had the power to make a difference. That night marked a turning point for Ethan, not because of the accolades or recognition, but because it solidified his commitment to paying it forward. From that point on, he dedicated even more time to mentoring young professionals, volunteering in underserved communities, and advocating for causes close to his heart. He started a scholarship fund for students pursuing careers in tech, ensuring that financial barriers wouldn't hold anyone back from chasing their dreams. Claire watched all of this unfold with quiet satisfaction. She often joked that hiring Ethan was the best decision she'd ever made. not just for the company but for herself. Seeing how far he'd come reminded her why she fell in love with leadership in the first place, the chance to empower others to achieve greatness. Years later, when Ethan reflected on his journey, he realized that success wasn't measured by titles or awards. It was measured by the lives he touched along the way, by the interns who went on to land their dream jobs, the colleagues who became lifelong friends, and the strangers who found hope in his story. In the end, Ethan's life was a testament to the idea that kindness has a way of coming full circle. What started as a simple act of helping a stranded motorist blossomed into a legacy of compassion, perseverance, and purpose. And though he knew challenges would always arise, he faced them with unwavering faith in the belief that doing the right thing, no matter how small, could spark extraordinary change. As he closed the door to his office one evening, ready to head home, Ethan paused for a moment. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars against the night sky. Somewhere out there, another person was facing a crossroads, wondering if their efforts mattered. Ethan smiled softly, knowing the answer.